Hey college football fans, this is episode 45 of Walk It Off with Chappy, an episode I like to call Damn Lanning. Of course I'm talking about Dan Lanning, the new head coach of the Oregon Ducks. So with this being the kickoff of Pac-12 week on the CFP podcast, I want to highlight the Oregon Ducks and their new head coach. So let's look at what he did. Coming fresh off of a national championship with the Georgia Bulldogs, and orchestrating a defense that resulted in eight of his defensive players from past year's squad getting drafted in the NFL. 5 of them in the first round, including the number 1 overall pick, DN Travon Walker. Not only did he do that, but he comes to Oregon, relatively quick turnaround right after the national championship victory, and he brings in the number 13 recruiting class from this past cycle. A recruiting class that included 5-star offensive tackle and top 10 national player Josh Connerly, as well as 4-star recruits Jordan Bryant James, a running back, and then on the defensive side, defensive backs Jaleel Tucker and Jaleel Florence, and then Devin Jackson, a linebacker. He also brings in the number 24 ranked recruiting class of transfer portal transfers, guys who come over from the portal, according to 24/7 Sports. So on the offensive side, Bo Nix, a quarterback from Auburn, who we'll talk more about in just a minute. Running back Bucky Irving, who averaged 5.3 yards a carry and just under 700 yards rushing for Minnesota last year. Big loss for them. Also wide receivers Chase Cota from UCLA and Caleb Chapman from Texas A&M, guys who put up big numbers when they were healthy and playing the last couple of years. Then on the defensive side, Christian Gonzalez, a cornerback from Colorado, so an intra-conference transfer, and an even bigger intra-conference transfer and an intra-rivalry transfer, Sam Taimani, who's a D-lineman from University of Washington. All those guys that I mentioned are 4-star talents that transferred into Eugene. You also look at this year's recruiting class so far. He's nabbed recently 5-star quarterback Dante Moore from the state of Michigan, where I hail from, and also 4-star cornerback Caleb Presley, 4-star wide receiver Jurion Dickey, and then a total of 5 guys in their 9 that they've signed so far, or gotten commits I should say, for. 9 of those guys are top 15, or I'm sorry, 5 of those guys are top 15 at their position nationally. So he was known as a good recruiter, known as a good defensive guy, and he's bringing all this to Eugene, Oregon. So how does that translate in 2022? Well, spoiler alert, as we get ready for our Pac-12 preview podcast coming up this week, I have the Oregon Ducks as the top team in the Pac-12 North, going 11-1 in the regular season. So yes, that means, and I've said it before on here, I'm calling for an upset of the defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs in that Saturday of Labor Day weekend, September 3rd, when they go out to Atlanta in that great palace that they play football in Atlanta, Georgia, and they're going to knock off the Georgia Bulldogs. I think that Lanning's experience and his insight and intel with that Georgia program, and with Georgia having to replace some guys, and I know it's Georgia, they reload, they don't rebuild, but I think Oregon, with this talent that they bring over, including Coach Lanning as their head man, I think that gets the Bulldogs early enough, and Oregon is talented, so that pulls off the upset. But you look at their schedule as well. They get BYU, Stanford, UCLA, Washington, and Utah all at home. So they don't have to play USC from the south. They get their big rival Washington at home. They get Utah, who is considered to be by many the favorite to win the Pac-12 South, at home. So playing in front of those audibly auspicious fans at Autzen, that's going to be a big help. And then really the only 2 road games that concern me are the Pac-12 opener at Washington State, where in Martin Stadium, Wazoo is one of the better home teams in the last 4 years in the Pac-12. Do I think they're going to beat the Ducks? Not this year. And then the finale in the Civil War for the Platypus Trophy against Oregon State. That game is at research, so the chainsaws will be buzzing. But by then, Oregon, according to my projections, should be 11-0 and just need to win that last one to cap off an undefeated regular season and a spot in the Pac-12 championship. And even with a loss in the Pac-12 championship, if that comes, still might have a good enough resume to punch a ticket to the CFP playoff. So how are they going to do this? Well, you look on the offensive side. I talked about Bo Nix. So he's coming with Kenny Dillingham, or I should say is going to be reunited with Kenny Dillingham, who was his offensive coordinator in his red-hot freshman year at the University of Auburn, where Nix beat the Oregon Ducks as a true freshman. I think that the work between those two, I think the chemistry that they have, Bo Nix, a lot of people dog him when he plays outside of Jordan-Hare Stadium. Well, he's going to be playing in Autzen now. And again, with that schedule, with his skill set, and with the offensive genius that is Kenny Dillingham and the supporting cast I'm going to mention here in a minute, I think it's going to be good enough for Nix to be an all Pac-12 type quarterback. And after knocking off the Georgia Bulldogs in week 1, potentially one of those top 5 Heisman candidates for at least the first half of the season, because he'll put up the numbers and he'll have that big Georgia win on his resume. Well, in the backfield, Byron Cardwell averaged 6.8 yards per carry last season as the number 2 back for the Ducks. He's going to be number 1 this year. Bucky Irving, coming over from Minnesota, I talked about over 5 yards a carry, 700 yards rushing on the ground last year. It's a good 1-2 punch behind one of the nation's best offensive line groups. So they return all 5 starters, and they also have guys who rotated in. So they've got a lot of experience, and this is going to be probably one of the final candidates for the Joe Moore Award. They might even win it outright for the nation's best offensive line in college football this year. At receiver, that's really where the relative concern comes in, because they lost some of their production from last year, but they recruited really well at the wide receiver position. I'm talking about guys like Chris Hudson and Troy Franklin, Dante Thornton, Josh Delgado and Isaiah Brevard, who both redshirted this past year. So they're going to be back. They're going to be mentally and physically ready to go, presumably. And they also have one of the deepest tight end rooms in the country. Guys like Ferguson and Webb, Moliaki, the list goes on and on. Patrick Herbert. So they really go about 4 or 5 deep in that tight end room. Guys that can block but can also be a good outlet receiver for Bo Nix when he has to use his feet to improvise and keep a play alive. On the defensive side of the ball, defensive lineman Brandon Dorlus and Popo Almavai. Linebackers, they've got one of the best linebacking cores in the country. Noah Sewell, Justin Flo, Jeffrey Bassa, and then you also factor in guys who will be behind them, Swinson and Funa, DJ Johnson, who is a converted tight end because he's an athletic talent and because that tight end room is so deep. Adrian Jackson spelled some good minutes as a backup linebacker a year ago. The secondary is what concerns me a little bit. They lost a lot there, but they do return Jamal Hill. They also get guys like Addison and Stevens. Bennett Williams comes back. This is his 6th or 7th year playing college football after spending the first half of his career at Illinois. Now he's in Eugene. He had a pretty good season last year when he was healthy. And then you factor in Christian Gonzalez, who I talked about coming over in the transfer portal from Colorado, a 4-star talent. Many people think that he's got all Pac-12 type ability. He showed it early on as a freshman at Colorado in 2020. Dipped a little bit last year, but I think that in that Oregon scheme with D coordinator Tosh Lupoy and Dan Lanning kind of guiding things from a top-down approach, I think that their defense will be just fine. In fact, probably one of the better units in the Pac-12. On special teams, Camden Lewis at place kicker, Tom Snee at punter, one of the best kicker-punter combos in the country. And then keep an eye out for Seven McGee in the return game. I think that he's going to take at least one back to the house this year, whether it be on a kick return or a punt return. So all that factored in, there's a lot to like about the Oregon Ducks this year. So Duck fans, I want you to know that Chappy's calling it, and those of you who aren't Duck fans, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why there's solid evidence and argument to say that Oregon does not have a shot to not only win the North, but maybe win the Pac-12 this year, and maybe get that CFP ticket punched. I know last year is when a lot of people were calling for it, but there's a lot of good that's coming in, and I think they're just as good, if not better, than last year's squad. Yes, the same squad that beat Ohio State in the Horseshoe. So again, you heard it here first. or you heard it here. Maybe not the first one, but I'm Chappy. This is college football. This is CFP. This is what I know. Check out my website, cfpcollegefootball.com. Follow me on Twitter @ChappyCFB, and let's keep it rolling. Have some fun.